I think we're on. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
We're going to start our story in about 5 minutes. So,
So find your favorite spot to sit by your computer and get something to drink and be sure to join us. Our dog is here. He's going to help too. Say hi out there, computer land. There you go. Say hi, guys. I know. Hi. That's our dog. No, he's fine. Shh. Okay. I think he's about to get put in the yard. If he cuts up, I'll put him out. Just let him sit there. Maybe it's the birds. He sees the birds in the window. All right, you're getting banned. Oh. Well, at least it's bright and sunny today. It's a little chilly, but not too bad if you put a coat on. Go out for a walk or something. We've been walking our dog so much these days. He used to get 2-3 walks. Now he's up to like 5 walks a day. He's a very happy dog. He's a little loud when it's story time. Oh, here comes Conductor Larry. Or Engineer Larry. Poor dog. Now he's going to come to the window and sit there and look at us like, let me in. Poor dog. I bet he will. I'm waiting to see him. There's pens and pencils all over that place. If not, they're in the other cabinet. The trains behind us on the display were my dad's when he was a little boy. They're Lionel trains that my brother used to play with. We're going way back now. And I even think our son Brian played with them at one point. But yeah, that's part of our collection. We have a lot of trains. We have Larry's dad's trains and my dad's and Larry's trains, and we have some of Brian's, but Brian's took his trains with him when he bought his house. Oh, there you go.
I guess I got a little bit of a preview. Next week's story is going to be Where the Wild Things Are. So, and that'll be read by the mayor.
That's a good book.
Mayor Pat. So.
Well, I think one year I made Brian a costume from that book. That was one of his favorite books. We read every night to the kids when they were little. Every night. They have quite the collection of storybooks. But I'm sure you all get stories at nighttime too. This book was a gift to our son Brian back in 1996. He was 4 years old back then. It was a gift to him from his grandma and grandpa, Larry's mom and dad. And they picked this book up at the train depot in Santa Fe, New Mexico. See? There's the inscription. That's from them. They've since both passed away. So these are special books. Wait till you see the illustrations. They're wonderful. Here, there's the cover. The tunnel. Kind of like our tunnel here in Mount Airy that we have behind the old Super Fresh. Now it's the doctor's office. But yep. I bet you guys like trains. And we have our caboose here in town and the train station. Make sure to stop by when everything reopens.
All right. I'm trying to figure out if we're actually on. I don't see any comments from anybody.
It says live, 5:44. It's
Mhm.
giving you time. What time is it? Is it we should be starting? It's noon.
I know. I want to make sure that that we're actually going out there.
Oh, okay. I think we are.
So we'll be starting in just a minute. Let me verify that we're going on. Hey Gina, it's Larry. I was just wondering if you were able to see us on the Facebook page. Okay. All right, then we'll get started. Thank you.
This new technology gets us every time.
All right, we've been verified as on. And we'll go ahead and get today's story started. Today's story is going to be the Banshee Train. It's by Odds Botkin and it's illustrated by Ted Rose. Okay. Uh, this is a really nice story. Mary, tell him how we ended up with this book.
Like you said, this book was purchased for Brian back in 1996 when he was 4 years old. His grandma and grandpa, Larry's mom and dad, bought this for him in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's special. Both grandparents have since passed away, but Brian and Larry and grandpa, they were all big and are big train hobby people. So it's kind of special. We have a lot of train books.
Okay, all right. We'll start with the author's note and then go right into the story. So the author's note talks about the title, The Banshee Train. According to legend, the Banshee foretells death by wailing where it will soon take place. Irish immigrants who came to America in the 19th century to work on its new railroads brought stories of the Banshee with them. In the days of steam locomotives, wooden trestles built over rivers sometimes collapsed without warning, and people lost their lives. In this retelling of a Banshee legend, the fairy woman warns two trainmen, only this time her mission is a mission of mercy. All right. I'll let you kick it off.
Just an author and an illustrator's note, the pictures that we're going to be showing you, they were all done in watercolor paints. So for those of you who have tried painting, just keep that in mind when we show you the pictures. So let's start our journey. In the spring of 1929, a strange event took place in the mountains west of Denver, Colorado. Although train number 1 to Troublesome and Steamboat Springs was filled with passengers, the only two human beings who actually saw what happened were John Mercer, the train engineer, and Michael O'Reilly, his fireman. So let's see pictures. There you go. Nice pictures.
A week of downpours had melted the winter snowpack too fast. Torrents thundered in the deep mountain gorges. All along the Denver and Salt Lake lines, telegraph keys clicked out the danger. Bridges were at risk. Every railroad man was nervous.
Any of you been out to Colorado? Oh, there's the cows. As number 1 crossed Coal Creek Bridge, John Mercer worried about poor Canyon Trestle, 90 miles ahead. He knew that years before, the long wooden span over the Colorado River had washed out in a heavy spring floods. An unlucky engineer had driven his locomotive into the fog-shrouded canyon only to discover too late that Gore Canyon trestle was gone. In the 400-foot plunge to raging waters below, all souls aboard had been lost. There's the train on the trestle. See that? That's a tree.
Show 'em the picture when I read.
Okay.
John Mercer worked his engine upgrade into the roaring darkness of Moffat Tunnel. He had to yell to be heard. We'll slow up west of Windy Gap. I can check Gore Canyon trestle from there before we cross. O'Reilly nodded and checked his steam pressure. Mercer's throttle swung to the off position with a thunk.
Baffled, Mercer hugged the throttle back into position, resuming speed. Mr. O'Reilly, did you see that? He yelled. See what? O'Reilly called back. I can't see a thing in this gloom. Swirling fog swept past the cab windows as they rolled out the west tunnel portal into daylight. The long downgrade of the Continental Divide lay ahead. Mercer knew he'd have to work steam and ride his air brakes all the way. The last thing he needed was a faulty throttle.
You ready to whistle?
I'm ready to whistle.
Without warning, the conductor's air whistle shrieked next to his ear. Mercer twisted from his seat and looked back to see what was wrong. Was there an emergency back there? Sudden fear rushed over him. In the blackness of the tunnel they'd just left burned the distant headlight of another train. Mercer jerked the throttle to full steam. More fire, Mr. O'Reilly, he yelled. Somebody's on our line, coming fast from behind. O'Reilly began shoveling wildly. Mercer released gritty sand onto the track beneath the wheels, and he felt the engine surge forward and gather speed down the grade.
He's coming on at 45. That crazy fellow will hit us. Mercer blasted his whistle and stared back again. Out of Moffat Tunnel burst the pursuer, a huge dark engine pulling passenger cars. It sounded its whistle, wailing eerily. He sees us, yells Mercer, relieved. Now he'll slow down. But instead, the reckless train sped up. To avoid a collision, Mercer knew he had to outrun it. More steam, O'Reilly! He's still coming! We'll pass to the passing packet to get out of his way. Happens next.
Barely able to hold its own against the wild locomotive, number one pounded through Fraser at 50 miles an hour. Ahead around the sweeping curve lay Tabernash and the passing track that could save them. But as it swept into view, Mercer's heart sank. A huge coal train, dark and silent, sat on the side track in the thickening fog. Grimly, Mercer notched out at the throttle again. On into the mist and wet snow they flew.
The steep rock faces of Windy Gap loomed around them. What about the trestle? Cried O'Reilly, face ashen. Mr. Mercer, what about slowing down? Mercer stared at him, then into the stinging snow. Ahead, dense fog shrouded Gore Canyon and the trestle. Can't, he replied, eyes wild. Can't see the trestle. He looked back at his pursuer. Can't slow down. Gotta take it at full speed. Something like a cow.
All at once, the throttle jumped from its grip and hooked to the off a second time. Mercer recoiled in disbelief as his engine brake iron flew back by itself and locked. The train wheels ground sparks all along the wet rails. Brake shoe smoke roiled up from below. In a panic, O'Reilly hollered, "Mr. Mercer, we have no fire!" The pressure gauges had dropped to zero. Whining and shuddering, train number one ground to a halt. Then both men heard an unearthly shriek.
O'Reilly crept to the gangway and stared back. "Methinks we are about to die, Mr. Mercer," he stammered. "Look, 'tis the Banshee. She beckons us." At a dead stop, they waited to be struck from behind by hundreds of tons of steel traveling 50 miles an hour. Look in the smoke. What do you see there? That's the Banshee. See that? It's right there. There's the passenger cars.
But they felt no collision. Instead, the figure of a baleful woman raced across the car tops, shrieking something in a language they couldn't understand. Past their faces swept an engineer and a fireman, pale and determined. Ghostly passengers followed. Then all fell silent.
See the ghost? See him in there? Yep. And see the Banshee? She's right here, up in the smoke. I'm trying to get the glare away. There you go. The special train had vanished. All around Mercer and O'Reilly, their cab returned to life as pressure needles jumped and the brake iron clanked free. They peered forward, skin tingling. The snow had stopped. Like a quiet curtain, the fog began to lift. Down from the cab they climbed, stumbling forward. In wonder they stared at Gore Canyon. The rails twisted out and down into nothingness. More fog blew away. Gore Canyon trestle was completely gone. Look, see how the tracks are all twisted into nothing? Here, there you go. And there's the tunnel. Wonder what would have been bad if the Banshee hadn't shown up. Wow.
Later, as they prepared to return to Denver, the conductor scratched his head. "How you knew the train, the trestle was washed out in the fog and all, beats me," he said. "Got a sixth sense there, Mr. Mercer. All souls on board owe you their lives." Hardly listening, Mercer leaned close to O'Reilly. "Wasn't it 20 years ago that other train went over?" he whispered. "In April." "Yep. April 29th, wasn't it?" "I think it was," O'Reilly said. "That's today."
O'Reilly shrugged. "A miracle, Mr. Mercer. Methinks one accident here was enough for her, maybe." "For who?" asked the conductor, overhearing. But O'Reilly and Mercer wordlessly turned away and swung up into the cab. A few minutes later they backed their train up the grade toward Tabernash. High above, patches of sunlight swept the peaks. It would be a safe run back to Denver. The rains had ended.
And that's how the Banshee saved that train that day.
That's right. Oh, we forgot to wish you all a happy Earth Day. There you are.
And that's the end of our story for this week. Again, next week, the mayor will be reading Where the Wild Things Are.
That's right.
Okay? So we'll see you later. Thanks again for joining us. And we're going to end this video. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody. Take care, Mount Airy, and stay safe.
Goodbye.